Hi, I'm Teresa McDowell.
I'm Carmen Knudson-Martin.
And I'm Maria Bermudez.
We're co-authors of the text Socioculturally Attuned Family Therapy, Guidelines for Equitable Theory and Practice, that's been published by Routledge. In this clip, we'd like to introduce you to the book and talk a little bit about ourselves and how we became interested in diversity and equity and eventually came to write the book together.
So just to tell you a little bit about who we are collectively, all three of us are professors in a couple and marriage and family therapy graduate program. We all have years of experience as scholars, researchers, therapists, approved supervisors with AAMFT, and mentors, colleagues, and we have published quite a bit in our field as well as in others, as well as presented internationally and nationally in local and regional conferences. So all three of us, I would say that we're pretty passionate about our field of family therapy, and we're very excited about this book and what it has to offer our field, and especially for students in training, developing a heightened consciousness around social justice issues and diversity in general.
One of the things we thought you might be interested in is how we all came to an understanding or an interest or a passion for diversity and equity coming from very different paths and walks of life.
So I grew up on a farm in North Dakota where everybody is pretty similar. It's a pretty homogeneous culture. There's differences. But then when I was in my 20s, I had the experience of living first in Iran, and then in Senegal, and then in Amman, Jordan, and then in Costa Rica. And what I experienced there was what it was like to live on the outside and to not understand how to negotiate the social system or to be operating from a different value system than the dominant group there and such. And so it was after that I came back and studied family therapy. And I just brought this lens of awareness that there are so many different ways that people organize their lives and so many different ways that people live. And then it was pure luck. But the family therapy program that I decided to study in was in a sociology department. And so my PhD is actually in sociology. And so I think the unique piece that I've always brought to the field is this interest in how the what's outside of us, what's in the larger social context, how that's affecting the health and well-being and the relationships of individuals and families. And then as I started seeing clients, I would see these inequities playing out, and I got interested in studying my own clinical practice along with a group of colleagues and students, and developing a way of working in the moment of therapy that would help us make those connections between what's going on the outside and what we're seeing in terms of the problems that people bring to therapy.
And what led me to writing this book and collaborating and co-authoring with them is, I think, I'm originally from Honduras, from Central America, and I was very young. I was a baby when we moved to the United States. So being a part of an immigrant family and going back and forth to the United States, to Honduras, and traveling to Mexico to see family there as well, really shaped me in ways that are still very significant for me today. So for example, when I would go back to Honduras, I would notice sometimes they would make a really big deal out of, like, I have fair skin and blue eyes. And it was at that point, I think I came to awareness of white privilege. And I noticed that we were able to go out to eat and to restaurants or to go shopping. And I noticed that there was so much poverty and there were so many children. And I think that's when I was first aware of class privilege, even though we were working class family in the US. So I had an awareness of these things. I couldn't name them, of course. And it wasn't until much later, after I had graduated from 2 family therapy graduate programs and started working as a professor, and started to learn more about feminist family therapy and feminism in general, when I started teaching gender roles and intersectionality, that I started to gain like a heightened experience, a heightened awareness of all these issues. And so for me, it's a culmination of all of these experiences, of my lived experiences, my work as a researcher studying resilience among Latino families, and my feminist-informed therapy led me to equity-based family therapy, which for me has been so exciting.
I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, in an entrepreneurial family. I had an entrepreneurial father, in a white middle-class family. My experience was that when I was outside in the community, I had a great deal of privilege. People knew who my father was. I could pretty much go anywhere in Flagstaff and be safe and comfortable. But inside the family, there was a fierce patriarchy that really highlighted for me the intimate awareness of how power works in relationships within the family. And through that experience of that hierarchy and sort of fierce patriarchy, and that could be sometimes abusive, I learned this sort of, or became really intimately aware of what it means to have a power imbalance in the family. So I was always interested in diversity and equity. What really changed my trajectory was going into my doctoral program and getting a degree in liberatory education. That opened my eyes to all kinds of things. So much of my own cis privilege, my gender privilege, my racial privilege, whiteness, and so on. I was always had the middle class legacy that I could rely on. So there were so many privileges that I carried, and how I began to really interrogate those and try to understand what impact that has on the way I think and the way I do work, and on others. So through that process of bringing really liberatory educational ideas into family therapy, I got really interested in going outside of the field of family therapy and looking at critical social theories, critical geography. I looked at sociology, and so on, and trying to figure out how can we learn from this interdisciplinary knowledge, from this wide range of people who are trying to make a difference in society to create a more equitable society.
And could I add just one thing that I was aware of as you were talking, because I think we've tried to take a global perspective in this book and not just see family therapy through the eyes of sort of the dominant nature of the United States and North America. And my experience living in those other countries raised so much awareness of the privilege that I had, of language privilege, of speaking the English language. And no matter where I went in the world, there was always somebody who could speak my language and would make the effort to do that when I didn't know how to speak their language. And that really was very formative to me in being aware again of the not wanting to limit our understanding of family therapy to a lens that's so Eurocentric.
No, and what I appreciate about our book, and you're going to talk more about the structure of the book, but what I appreciate so much is that we did bring in so many case examples of transnational families, mixed status, documented families, families in which there's, just different types of family forms and family structures. And I think that in our case example, we were able to really showcase the richness of diversity.
I just want to piggyback that, what you talked about with the importance of understanding diversity and equity within a global context. The idea that you can't really understand diversity or social equity within just a U.S. context. It only makes sense when you put it in a global context. And how, obviously you're very bicultural, and I've gone back and forth to home and so on, and you've lived all over the world. And for me, it was a lot of work that I was able to do in Uganda, India, and Egypt, where I began to really look more closely at colonization and the process of colonization, and how to even begin to relate or share family therapy knowledge at all across national borders, with this huge sort of burden or expectation that that it will be U.S. knowledge and therefore colonizing. So
Mhm.
there's an attempt to be decolonizing, or at least not colonizing, in the text that we've written.
So we all love family therapy, and we are committed to what we think of as the enduring models of family therapy. And so what brought us to actually writing this book was wanting to say, how do we practice through the models of family therapy that have been so important to the field and to us over the years? And so we set out to do a book that applied this a broader, what we have come to call a third order thinking in a theoretical way to each of what we identified as the 10 major models of family therapy. And I just list those out for you. We, after an introduction to some of these concepts, then we apply socioculturally attuned structural family therapy, then brief and strategic family therapies, experiential family therapy, attachment-based family therapies, Bowen family therapy, contextual family therapy, cognitive behavioral family therapy, solution-focused family therapy, collaborative family therapy, and narrative family therapy. As we were doing each of these chapters, we start out by identifying what we considered to be about the 5 enduring concepts from each of these models. So we describe those for you first, and then we examine those concepts through our socio-contextual lens and consider what principles or guidelines we would need to actually do to enact this approach to family therapy in order to create what we call third order change.
In our next clip, we'll help you go from thinking to doing by sharing with you a set of trans-theoretical guidelines to support equitable practice.